it's been a couple years. So I keep thinking, oh, time is slowing down, but it's not. It's moving very fast. So there are so many things that go on, and I was joking about the name earlier. So the last time I was here, we were actually ConocoPhillips. But what kind of went under the radar, and I have a funny story about it, was that on May 1st of 2012, we became Phillips 66. And the funny story is that day we put a big old ad in the Alton Telegraph, and it said, "We are Phillips 66," and it was all these, it was full color. I'm like, wow, we never do advertising. So anyway, a year goes by, and the paper's still calling us ConocoPhillips. And I call my friend Dennis Grubaugh, and I'm like, Dennis, he's like, what now? And I said, no, ConocoPhillips kind of exists as a company in its own now, but we're really Phillips 66, so I just need you guys to refer that, because these guys in Houston are getting really mad that they're getting blamed for something that Phillips 66 did. So he's like, well, Melissa, when were you going to tell us that you were Phillips 66? And I said, well, you guys did a story about it when we announced that we were going to do it. No, I said, didn't you see that big ad in the paper? And he's like, no. Anyway, so so to give you our lineage, right? It's like a broken family. Shell to 98. Small company Epilon that was a partnership between Texaco and Shell from 98 to 2000. Tosco buys us 2001. Phillips buys Tosco. Phillips Petroleum. 2002, Conoco and Phillips Petroleum merged to create ConocoPhillips. 2004, small company named Encana comes and says we want a part of Wood River and we want a part of Borger to create WRB. That's the B and the WR if you see it on our sign. And then, but we're still really under the ConocoPhillips operations. So then Encana decides to spin off their upstream operations and create a new company called Encana. So they're still our Canadian partner in the WRB part of it. But then in July of 2011, ConocoPhillips decides to go in a different area, and they call it, what did we call it? It was a fancy name for "we don't want you anymore," but it was, but it was a spinoff basically. But they had a real fancy name, and so fancy that I don't even remember it. But really, on May 1, we are now part of Phillips 66. The CEO, he's great. He came in and one of our employees said, "We're Phillips 66. You could have created a new name. You could have done all these other things." And he says, when I graduated in 1979 with my engineering degree, I had 15 job interviews. And I got offers from 14 of those 15 companies. And so then he goes on and tells the whole story. And then at the end he says, now that question at the beginning, I got job offers from every company but Conoco. Hence the Phillips 66. But anyway, who is Phillips 66 today? Phillips 66 is the refineries in the portfolio. So there's us and 12 others, or 10 others, or 11 others, something like that. There's our transportation, so our pipelines, our terminals. The marketing division is still under it, although we don't own any of the marketing on the street. The jobbers, they do franchise from us, basically. We have a huge reliance on what we call our midstream business and chemical business. So what we don't own, what ConocoPhillips still owns, as many other companies, is the upstream, so the actual pulling it out of the ground. We don't pull anything out of the ground anymore. So we would call ourselves an independent refiner. Marathon did the same thing a year before we did. So there's Marathon Oil and Marathon Petroleum, two different companies traded on the stock market. So ConocoPhillips still traded on the stock market, probably still in a lot of people's portfolios. Phillips 66 goes under PSX, traded independently on the stock market, and last year we did something with a few of our transportation entities that they actually trade under another symbol. So we're going to see continued change in the industry as the industry is continuing to change. Larry is getting away from the refinery and going right back to what we call the upstream, because as he and I were just talking, oil and gas in North America has been reinvented. It has been reinvented by technologies and the fact that It's easier to pull oil out of the ground. We used to think that the oil that we had was no longer accessible, and we were reliant on the Middle East and other countries like that. Today, you know, the North American region, continent, has the ability really to be oil independent, not 100%, but very, very darn close. And there's a lot of interesting things going on. So I want to come back to that, but let's talk about the refinery a little bit. So since I was last here, finished construction, all our construction workers said goodbye to us and left the region. And we started up our coker and all the other units associated with that, and it's gone fairly well. Our friends at Shell, they had a plant on the Gulf Coast that they were starting up similar to ours about 6 months later, and they had some real problems when they started up, and ended up having a $1 billion rebuild on one of the operating units that they had just started up. So we came up with no safety issues. We had some mild community odors that we've since addressed and done a lot of things to, that in terms of how our wastewater treatment plant reacted. So that was my big oops, because I'm going to listen to what I hear from the So I'm glad that safety was great. I'm glad that the operations excellence was great. Would have liked to have come up without impacting our neighbors. We did have some odors, but so that part of the plant has been running really well. And we're very fortunate that we did it. A lot of people delayed their investments because the economy dropped right as we were about ready to make that investment. And by coming online when we did, we've been able to take advantage of an unfortunate situation for the nation, but a fortunate situation for the Midwest, which is the fact that the Keystone Pipeline hasn't been built, created what we call the crude glut in the Midwest. So if you remember, the first phase of Keystone stops right at our refinery backyard, and created an opportunity for us and the others who can get access to the oil, which is very interesting because if you drive down Route 3, right near the Confluence Tower, if you look over to the side where the industrial is, you'll see some tanks under construction. Anyone see that here recently?
Yeah.
Do you realize that that is all about crude by rail and crude by barge? That is not my company. That is a company called Omega Partners, and they have built that tankage so that they could do crude by rail and crude by barge. So a lot of people say, well, is that pipeline going to ever get built? I don't know. I don't know, but what I do know is our country is moving on. Canada is moving on without us, and if it doesn't get built, people are finding other ways to get the crude. Now, I think crude by rail is an alternative. I think pipeline crude movements is the safest. So whatever, you could debate that, but I think it's unfortunate that piece of infrastructure hasn't been put in. But okay, so the refinery is running really well. So what's next, right? What's next for us? Well, we have a lot of hiring going on right now, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that our workforce is turning over. I mean, so some of it was new jobs, some of it is we need to bring more people in to support what we have going on. But the other thing is our workforce is just ready to retire. So our HR manager, who happens to be my boss, provided me some statistics. So in 2011, we had 55 people hired in, like new, and these are really, some of these are our staff folks, but a lot of these are crafts and our operations folks. We hired another 50 people in 2012. In 2013, we were well into the 60s, and this year alone, we have hired 75 new operations and crafts folks. Now, some of these operators will come in and join us in June, but so between January and June, 75 new people. But we're seeing the same thing in our engineers. A lot of engineers I know are just not too far away from retirement. So we've got a lot going on. We have our 10 unions. We have 530 people who are in our unions. We had gotten a 7-year contract extension back in 2006 or 7. I guess it was 7. So the contracts were up this year at the end of May. We've reached agreements with all 10 unions, so that is out of our way. We have an incredible partnership with labor, and I mean, I really have to say their dedication to the safety culture and ability to work smart has really propels us. So they're probably a little bit higher in cost of doing work here, but they do pay dividends for us here. We have a huge turnaround coming up in September, and then another huge turnaround coming up in the September of the following year, and another huge turnaround in the following September. So the next 3 years, you will have this influx of a lot of people in the fall coming into this region to do work here. And it's just the basis of what we look like now and what it takes us to take these certain operating units off stream at one time, do all the inspections, do the maintenance required on them, and do any other necessary things that we want to do. And so while we'll never see and feel the full impact of what almost $4 billion project meant in terms of workforce in this area, you're going to see a lot of people in here. And the other thing that we have out on the horizon is that our government keeps changing the gas fuel standards, so we call them clean fuels. So there'll be another round of clean fuels coming up in the 2017 time, and so that means in order for us to even be in business, we'll have to make some additional investments to make the gasoline and diesel fuels that we make. So I want to leave some time for questions, but I was up in Springfield with our legislative friends on Tuesday, and we actually had our group give a presentation to some legislators. And so just in Illinois, so there used to be 11 refineries in the state of Illinois. Today there's 4, and we know what some of that contraction looks like because I already felt that. But today in Illinois, the oil and gas together, because there is a shale play going on in southern Illinois, although we're not quite there in developing it. But there's employment from our industry equates to 263,000. So that's about 3.6% of Illinois' total employment numbers. Our income is over 15 billion, almost $16 billion. And our value added to Illinois is close to 33 billion. So I know that this region understands the importance of manufacturing here, and so we want to do whatever we can do to be successful here, and also be a responsible and good neighbor too. So.